It appears to have been a very busy day for everybody but the Calgary Flames.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and I am joined by my partner in crime, Nick Zararis. Nick, how are you doing today?
My eyes are a little tired. I've got like 90 tabs open in my browser. I've been glued to my computer since about 10 a.m. this morning. It's been a busy day.
Yeah, and we're going to talk all about that and then some on today's episode of Locked On Flames. As of right now, Noah Hanifin is still a Flame, and we're going to dive more into that. But make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. Do you think Noah Hanifin's sitting in the Tampa Bay locker room right now?
No, but I think he's definitely looking around a little more detailed than he usually did. He might have I don't even know what rich people use to book a hotel room. I don't think they use Expedia, but he's definitely made some calls about, what's renting look like? Should I get a hotel because it's only going to be a couple months? Should I look for a temporary place? 6-month lease? Are we going to get a deal done so I stay here long term? Should I be looking at houses? There's a lot of factors at play here, but I do think it's kind of interesting that the schedule makers, that Calgary's in Florida at the moment when, in my opinion, the two best suited teams to trade for Hanifin are the Panthers and the Lightning.
Yeah, it's one of those kind of, universe working in funny ways sort of things. But knowing that he has played his last home game at the Saddle Dome, how do you think he feels right now? Do you think he's just kind of like, well, this is it. Like, it was great to start my career here after getting traded from Carolina, but let's get a move on it? Or do you really think that his team has...
I think he feels like the prettiest girl in school right now. He knows no matter what, people want him. He's going to get paid a lot of money wherever he ends up, and he's going to get to move to somewhere, more he wants to be. That's been the driving force of this narrative, is that he doesn't want to stay in Canada in general. He wants to move back to the States. If he could move to Florida, if he could go back to the Northeast, back to Boston, go back to Massachusetts, New England, where he's from, that type of thing. That's been the driving force of this. It's not that the Flames aren't good. It's not that they haven't taken care of him. It's he wants to be stateside for whatever reason. I'm sure there's any number of things we could talk about as to specifically why, but he's got to feel pretty good because he's going to get what he wants one way or another. Like the absolute worst case is he gets traded somewhere, he doesn't sign an extension, and then July 1st he has a million offers to go and sign, because there are always going to be desperate teams. And frankly, Noah Hanifin is a good player, and a player of his ilk just doesn't become available on July 1st all that often to begin with.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about how there's like that July 1st tax. Like there's just always going to be an overpay during free agency. And I think Noah Hanifin could rightfully deserve and earn that nice little extra chunk of change if that's the case.
And something we can add into that as far as overpays. The summer, the NBA salary cap went crazy where they got the new TV deal. That was 2015, 2016. That was the year Kevin Durant signed with the Warriors after being with OKC for the first couple of years of his career. The money that got handed out that summer was stupid because every team, and basketball, obviously the salary cap's a lot bigger, so the numbers sound crazier, but the salary cap legitimately went up like $22-23 million in a single summer. So everybody was just throwing money around at role players, at guys who weren't worth it. And this summer, we're going to get a significant jump for hockey. Back when pre-pandemic, the usual year-over-year growth was about 2 to 3 million in that ballpark increase. We've been in a relatively flat cap environment. It only went up $1 million this year, but we've been operating in the low 80s for a couple of years now. if everything checks out, and I know from time to time the NHL fudges their projections because they want to sound good, but if everything checks out, we're talking about a $5 or $6 million increase this summer.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's not an insignificant player. Like, Pavel Buchnevich makes $5.8 million. Jake Gensel makes about $6 million. That's a really good player. And somebody like Hanifin, to a desperate team that needs a defenseman on that job. Like, there's a world where on July 1st, Danny Briere goes, how much do you want? And Noah Hanifin is the Flyers' new first pair left-handed defenseman. And he fits in the window because he's still young enough where he can be one of the older guys on a young team. He could go to any number of places this summer and make out really well. He's got to feel great. His biggest goal is just not to get hurt in the game tomorrow. Other than that, he's got nothing to worry about.
He was skating during practice today. And obviously there's a lot of time between, that it was like 2:00 this afternoon until, game time tomorrow. But do you think there is going to be a decision made that he sits out? I
would. If it were my team, that is exactly what I would be advocating for just... You are taking on way, 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 way too much risk in letting him play. Frankly, he should have been sitting for basically the last week. And I know it's different in hockey where guys are going to be especially stubborn about coming out and they want to show to the teams that are potentially looking at them, we're not just worried about me, I'm worried about the team. All that's great. He gets hurt tomorrow and they can't trade him and they lose out on the assets. They look stupid. It's really that simple. Playing him is extremely short-sighted, but I know he's going to insist he plays.
Yeah, and I think, we were having this conversation back a month ago about when the Flames were going to start sitting Chris Tanev and potentially Noah Hanifin. And they never sat Tanev. Thankfully, nothing happened in between before the deal got done. But they're playing with fire here, and I'm okay if he's played his last game as a Flame.
It's very frustrating because you understand that this is not a hockey thing. This is a pride and a people thing. Yeah. And we talk a lot about that's what makes hockey especially difficult to handicap and to interpret is there's a real human element within this that guys are stubborn, that they don't care about logic, that their feelings really are a big factor in their decision making.
Yeah. And it's kind of like the opposite of facts don't care about your feelings. Their feelings do not care about facts. They're nowhere to be found. But coming up next, we are going to talk about moving into free agency, which is 4 months away at this point. But as we've seen, the season went by in the blink of an eye, and I'm sure the postseason will as well. But, and of course, Jacob Markstrom may be on the move come July as well. But first, we are going to take a quick break here, and I'm going to talk to you all about the app that you absolutely need, and that is Sleeper. Regardless of where the Flames are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy apps, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like McDavid or McKinnon will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Flames fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That is code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Did you know that even if you have a 401k retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this. Now through April 30th, Robinhood is even matching or even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right. No cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames as we dive into all the good stuff going on during this crazy Wednesday leading up to the NHL trade deadline. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Where do we start? Where do you see this team come July 1st?
I think Markstrom will be the defining decision they have to make. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen now because I think the Devils kind of realized they're screwed. When I wrote the Timo Meier piece for my Substack last week, they had 21 games remaining, and to make the playoffs, conservatively, they were going to need to win 16 of those 21 games. They have since lost 2 more of those games since that, because they lost over the weekend in both of their games. And so basically they would have to win something in the neighborhood of 17 out of 19 over the rest of the season to just match what the Flyers' current pace is. And that doesn't account for the Islanders, who are kind of lingering and making up ground, frankly. So if the Devils aren't going to trade for Markstrom, the only really other goalie needy team that's in a playoff position is LA, and LA already has a lot of money tied up in a lot of different things, and they probably wouldn't be able to make a Markstrom deal work right now. We talked about this a lot as we were getting into the month of February, the idea of if they can trade Markstrom, why it's difficult to trade a goalie. The biggest thing is there's just not a lot of money in the system. But when you look around, all of these playoff teams, they just don't have a lot of cap space. So I know you'll say, but if the Flames retain half or the Flames retain a quarter, it becomes more bearable. It does. Don't get me wrong. But $4 million for a goalie when you probably already have a goalie that's making at least $4 or $5 million, and you're going to have $9 million tied up in goalies. Only one of them can play at a time. And are you better served hoping that goalie you have that's been a little bit below average bounces back? Or would you rather add, Anthony Duclair to your top 9? That's the type of calculus you have to decide between of, would I rather one more top 9 forward, or would I rather try and get this marginal increase? And that's not to say goalies aren't valuable, but it's a lot harder to not quantify. It's distill out, like sift through. It's a lot harder to get true value for your goalie. So I think as far as Markstrom, I think that's a summer decision, if it even happens.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't know what things look like between Craig Conroy and the rest of, any interested parties. And we certainly don't know if Markstrom has put in an official trade request, because no one would confirm or deny that, which I completely understand, because quite honestly, there does not need to be any more discussion or rumors surrounding Markstrom. I think that he really tried to do the team a favor, and it kind of came back and bit him in the butt. I don't think it works. I don't think it works out for him.
I think because the only landing spot doesn't work anymore. Teams are more inclined to shift their goalie situation around in the summer when they have a better idea of what their team is going to look like. We talk a lot about that. We don't typically see starting goalies get traded at the deadline because it's hard to get acclimated in, a month. You basically, you have a month of time. You have about 15 games to get situated to ramp up for the postseason. It's hard enough as a forward, a defenseman. As a goalie, it is really difficult to get yourself acclimated. So I think Markstrom is almost certainly a summer decision, especially because the Devils are kind of in no man's land. You know, if the Devils had won their games over the weekend and had a glimmer of momentum, maybe I could see a world where Fitzgerald throws the Hail Mary. And even if they don't make the playoffs this year, they've got Markstrom in the system for 15 games to ramp up into next season. But being that there's only one suitor, and that trade already kind of fell apart multiple times, according to various reports, I don't think it's going to happen.
No. And then there have been reports, I don't know how true they are, of New Jersey calling Boston for Allmark, but I do feel like that's even kind of more of a stretch. I think that, I don't know, that whole situation it's the common denominator is New Jersey. So once again, New Jersey, kind of a problem. But what would surprise, I guess what wouldn't surprise me is if a player like Blake Coleman potentially was moved as well.
I completely agree with you. We talked about this last week as far as, you know, if you had the best case scenario, you would be trying to find a suitor for him, for Mangiapane, because those guys will get you good returns. Yeah. They have, in Coleman's case in particular, he has a lot of playoff experience. He can play up and down your lineup. You know, Blake Coleman was playing on the Devils' first line when the Lightning traded for him 4 years ago now. And then he went to Tampa and he played on the third line. He's been between the second and third line in Calgary. Solid, steady Eddie, nothing extremely flashy, not ridiculously expensive. Can kill some penalties if you need him to. Useful hockey player, the type of guy that does well this time of year. You know, if he were an expiring contract, he'd be the third or fourth best player available at this deadline. Behind Gensel and Buchnevich, Blake Coleman is probably the best forward that would be available. Ditto Mangiapane. I know it hasn't gone as well for him the last 2 years since signing the extension, but I believe in the player. I like the skill set, and I think in an environment where he wouldn't be asked to drive offense as much and be allowed to just kind of play, I think he would do really well on a contender's third line.
Yeah, and he is due for a contract at the end of next season as well. So it might be smart to start. I mean, I'm sure they know how to do their jobs. I'm not going to tell Craig Conroy how to do his job, but you should probably start making phone calls, poke around, see who may be interested come the summer, just because he's already making $5.9 million. He's going to be 28 in April. Do you really want to sign him to another long-term extension with a good chunk of change attached?
No, I think that's a player you could see moved in the summer, Blake Coleman. Mangiapane, not so much. I think Blake Coleman, it really depends. I think it would make sense. I think there would definitely be a market for him, especially against the context of the salary cap going off. You know, you remember what I said before about, you know, probably about $5-6 million. That's basically Blake Coleman's cap hit. You know, you could take him on without really having to do a whole lot else to your books, and you have him for 2 playoff runs.
Yeah. And that would, I mean, like you said, he's an established NHL player that has quite a lot of playoff experience and success in the playoffs. So that's one of the reasons why I liked him coming to Calgary to begin with, because he was obviously fresh off the 2 Stanley Cups, but he had that grinder mentality, but also like that hard work paid off and won him to help win 2 Stanley Cups. So it's like, I feel like even now that would be even more attractive for teams.
Good players move the needle. There are not a lot of good players. That's what makes them good, especially in hockey where it's hard to move guys around. The extra money in the system this summer is going to open up a lot of things for a lot of different teams, the Flames included, especially as a team that has guys who are kind of expensive. This newfound flexibility will help them either shop guys or further configure their roster to what the vision of the future is.
Yes. And coming up next, we are going to wrap up the show with talk about the trade market at large and just kind of how things are playing out. As 48 hours from now, we will have no more deadline. But first, we're going to take a quick break and talk to you about Indeed. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Indeed partners with you every step of the way in the hiring process, and you can find great talent through time-saving tools like the Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. With Indeed's Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for the quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post on Indeed.com/locked-on. Offer valid through March 31st. All you have to do is go to Indeed.com/locked-on to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us on this chaotic Wednesday. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Jess Balmosto and at Nick Zeraris. Did they think the deadline got moved to today?
This happens from time to time where the one trade kind of gets the ball rolling because the musical chair starts effectively.
Mm-hmm.
That's when there are, especially a year like this, where there just aren't a lot of quality players available. The two best, Buchnevich and Gensel, are still with their teams. It sounds like Gensel is definitely going to happen. It's just a matter of where. Buchnevich, it wouldn't surprise me if the Blues did that in the summer or at next year's deadline, being that they still have the year of team control. You would just get more right now because you've got 2 years of team control. You get 2 playoff runs, you get more for that. But Henrique going to Edmonton, immediately the Rangers felt they needed to hurry up and get the Wenberg thing done because Colorado, granted Colorado had traded Byram for Casey Middlestat, so maybe they weren't in on Wenberg anymore, but the Rangers felt, being that Henrique was gone, they needed to get that third line center ironed out, especially if you believe some of the reports out there today that they were prioritizing the third line center over the first line right wing. But yeah, it's musical chairs. There are only so many centers available, and the drop off gets pretty stark. At first it was Lindholm, and then if I would probably have Henrique and Wenberg about even. And then we're going to start talking about guys like Bukestad and Nick Dowd, who aren't bad, but those are probably fourth liners on a good team, not third line centers. And that's really what happened today. The gears got turning. Florida got Tarasenko, which I imagine will get the gears going on Duclair and a couple of the other wingers that are out there. But that's ultimately what happens. One trade kind of kicks everybody in gear because you don't want to get stuck when the music stops. There's a team that needs stuff. You can't afford to get caught.
Where do you see Anthony Duclair going? Because there's been a lot of chatter, I guess, with Flames fans about bringing him in for Huberdeau. Could you see something like that working out?
So in a vacuum, the idea makes sense. The Sharks need bodies. They need somebody to kind of be the face of the team during this transitionary period. Money is no object to them because they know they're not going to be good for at least a couple more seasons. Their most expensive guys, Hurdle, Logan Couture, Mark-Edward Vlasic, who is still somehow in the league. In a vacuum, it makes sense, but you're going to have to give the Sharks an awful lot to incentivize them to take Huberdeau's money, even though it doesn't matter to them, like their cap situation, because it doesn't. They're not trying to be competitive. That's a lot of money tied up for a lot of seasons to try and trade away. I would not be opposed to the Flames trying to make a hockey trade for somebody they feel they would be able to extend. Duclair, solid top 9 forward, good straight line speed, score 20 goals. Defense, optional. He's a good hockey player. I think he's going to end up probably with whoever's the loser in the Buchnevich-Gensel market. If he ended up with the Rangers, the Islanders, I could see the Leafs, I could see Vegas, I could see Vancouver. There are a number of teams I could see Duclair ending up with because he's not expensive. He only makes $3 million a year. He has no trade protection of any kind, so he can be traded to any team. And if you like him, he won't be that expensive to keep after this year, and he's still relatively young.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the Flames really shouldn't be focusing on bringing anyone in like a true needle mover right now. I think that we have...
I wouldn't say that. I will disagree with that on one premise because, if there was a world where you could turn a roster player into something else, if you could do your version of the Bowen Byram Casey Middlestat trade, that would be a situation like, the framework I've been throwing around forever is DeBrusk and whatever for, Noah Hanifin, that type of thing. Yeah, sure. Then it would make sense. But the Flames shouldn't be purely adding. They should be trying to reconfigure their roster. But please, go continue.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I meant. That shouldn't be their primary focus. I think, like you said, if you can get something like DeBrusk and a prospect and maybe a draft pick back for Hanifin, that's good. But I don't think that they need to be selling off assets to be acquiring these people. They're not buyers right now.
No, but what I will say is you never know. Weird things happen. Teams that aren't really in the mix will occasionally shake things up because they feel like they need to. If something is feasible that can help the team right now and in the interim, by all means, I'm not totally opposed to trying to improve the roster right now if it would help them going forward as well. Like we said, the hockey trade, it's hard to do because there's not a lot of money in the system. But in an ideal world, if something works, I'm not totally opposed.
Yeah, I just am interested to see how these next 36 hours roll out and how anything pans out, because I feel like there could be something just completely out of left field that no one saw coming. And I feel like that's always the best part.
Yeah, absolutely. The mystery team, if we're talking about the insider bingo card, the mystery team or the player that wasn't expected to become available that becomes available, that happens. On occasion, weird things happen. Keep your notifications on for the important people. Probably won't get a lot of sleep. Probably strain my eyes a lot over the next few days, but this is what's fun about sports is the stretches like this.
Yeah, especially when your team is expected to do one thing or another. I think that kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat even more. And it's an exciting time to be, I guess, a Flames fan because change is coming. And that's what we have all been asking for. And they're finally giving us what we want. But Nick, do you have anything else you would like to add on today before we wrap up?
I probably should get some sleep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Everyone, please make sure you are drinking enough water. Have like a peanut butter jelly sandwich, something. Give your eyes a rest. But don't forget to subscribe to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. That way you never miss an update here on the Locked On Flames for your trade deadline coverage.